Hello, friends. Welcome back to Manitou Lockdown Bible Study on Philippians, in which we read slowly through the book of Philippians, which was written by the Apostle Paul while he was locked down under house arrest by the Roman authorities for disturbing the peace. He was locked down either in Ephesus or Rome, we're not sure. And this letter was written to the Philippian church and carried there by one of the people named in it, Epaphroditus, which we will get to in a while. So far, we've gotten through the first 26 verses in 3 episodes. If you haven't watched those, then I encourage you to go back. I had one person email me and say that she sat down and binged all 3 of them. So I feel like I've really accomplished something if something we put on here is binge worthy. So thanks for that. Also got a question. So maybe what I want to do right here is, if there was a question or a thought that got shared in between the last time we had this and now, then I'll just point out the question, not necessarily answer it, but just point it out, because it might be a question that you had as well. And the question, this was Kathy who asked this question. She wanted to know in verses 15 through 17, where it talks about other people who proclaim Christ. Some proclaim Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. Others proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition. She was wondering what were these other people proclaiming Christ out of? Were they prosperity gospel folks, or what was the reason how they were proclaiming it? I only did a little bit of looking on this, and there's a couple of things it might be referring to. At least I could find. There's probably more. One has to do, if you look over in 2 Corinthians in chapters 10 through 13, you realize there is a mention of money. And Paul makes a big deal of not asking for it because he did not want to be a burden to the folks in Corinth. And so it's possible that there are some folks who were attaching their messages to some form of payment. So he could be referring to that folks have gotten in the business of it. Don't think the irony is not lost on me as a pastor whose vocation and is paid for in part for preaching is there. So that's part of it. The other piece it could be is that there are folks. Paul had a big disagreement with folks in regards to circumcision and whether that was necessary or not. And so it's possible that he's talking about people who are proclaiming Christ and saying in some ways there are certain works or whatnot that folks have to follow in order to be accepted by Jesus. So those are just a couple that might be the case. I'm curious if you have other ideas, you do some research, please let me know. Shoot me an email and we'll see what we come up with. The second thing I want to point out is that we'll come to that later. Let's read the passage. I'm going to read it through 2 times. Invite you to listen for a word or phrase. If that is not helpful to you, then listen. Just what do you notice? What do you notice? And then what do you wonder about this passage? All right. Maybe the first time we'll go, what do you notice? And then the second time through, I'll ask you, what do you wonder about this passage? All right, here we go. Philippians chapter 1, verses 27 through 30. Listen now to the word of the Lord. Only live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent and hear about you, I will know that you are standing firm in one spirit, striving side by side with one mind for the faith of the gospel, and are in no way intimidated by your opponents. For them, this is evidence of their destruction, but of your salvation. And this is God, since you are having the same struggle that you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. What do you notice? What word sticks out? Pause for a moment on that. What do you notice? What sticks out? If you want to type something in, please go ahead and do so. Let's read it again. This time, either what do you notice or what do you wonder? What question comes up after reading this section? Only live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent and hear about you, I will know that you are standing firm in one spirit, striving side by side with one mind for the faith of the gospel, and are in no way intimidated by your opponents. For them, this is evidence of their destruction, but of your salvation, and this is God's doing. For he has graciously granted you the privilege not only of believing in Christ, but of suffering for him as well. Since you are having the same struggle that you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. This is the word of the Lord. So what do you wonder? As you hear this, there's a few questions that come up for me. What do you notice? What do you wonder? While you're thinking about that, I'm going to offer a couple things I noticed and then a couple of things I wonder. One, and I'll admit I did a little bit of reading before this. In verse 27, when Paul says, live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel, this word, live your life in a manner, is politeuthei. See if I got that right. I might not. Politeuthei. Yeah, that's my best guess on how to pronounce it. Which has to do with living a life that is how is it put? To discharge one's duties as a citizen. So how you live in the political sphere, not that you're a politician, but polity means people. How you live amongst the people, may it be done in a manner that's worthy of Christ. One of the reasons that sticks out to me is because right now we're all being asked to politeuthei. Politeuthei. I should be able to pronounce that. Politeuthei. With the current quarantine, we're being asked to live in a way that is. Paul wasn't talking about in that sense, but it's a manner worthy of Christ. And so, what we're doing, even if you don't feel like you're personally in this risky category, which is a bit of a myth because we're all a bit at risk, you staying in and keeping social distancing is helping other people out. It's saving lives. And so it's a totally different situation, but I think that word and that invitation Paul applies in both places. So that's the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed is this, is that Paul says, whether I come and see you or I'm absent and hear about you. So he's saying, so he's writing this letter and he's saying, because he's not physically present with them, and he's not sure if he ever will be physically present with them again, but he's using this means of technology of this letter writing to be present with them in some way. And then they write letters back so that they're present with him. So this technology, which we don't think of letter writing as a technology, but it is, was a way that they remain present to each other. And so right now we're using this means of the computer, the internet, to in some ways remain present with each other. It's how we do it. As we record our services or do Zoom calls or telephone calls, it's one of the ways we remain present with each other, even if we're physically absent. And so Paul is experiencing this kind of tension as well. And there's the third thing I noticed. He says, I will know that you are standing firm in one spirit, striving side by side with one mind for the faith of the gospel. You get this word one mentioned twice, and it's played out three different ways. He's saying you're one in spirit. You're standing side by side, so you're one physically. You're physically united, one next to each other, and being of one mind. So being connected in spirit and in body and in mind, being one. And what this makes me think of is a few verses before this, when Paul talks about wanting, being caught between being united, departing and being united with Christ, or remaining so that he can be a help to the Philippians, is this desire, this desire that Paul has to be one with Christ, to experience this oneness, this unity with God. And he sort of chastises other people for saying it's some sort of competition, as if this is competition to get to experience oneness with Christ before anyone else does. No, it's all of us. We're all like the edges of the wheel, and there's a spoke, and Christ is at the center. And as one of us gets closer, in some ways it draws all of us closer to the spoke. And so we're all one in this. So as I draw closer to oneness with God in spirit, it also draws those who are next to me closer to God in spirit. And so it's just another reminder that we're in this together, and that what one person does matters to the other people. So Paul is here pointing this out with that it's in some ways connected. Our oneness as Christ is connected with our oneness with each other. So those are the three things I noticed in this. And then here's a couple of things. In no way intimidated. Thanks, Sherry. I saw that. Is what stuck out to her. And now I'm curious, what did you wonder? Was there anything in this passage you're like, don't know what that means, or wonder why he said that? The one thing I thought of, the question I had, was at the end. Paul says, since you are having the same struggle that you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. I wonder, what exactly was that struggle? How is it the Philippians are struggling now in a way that Paul was struggling before? Was it that he was struggling with the Roman authorities and now is under house arrest? Are they having people who were arrested? Was it there are people who are preaching a different kind of gospel? Maybe it was some physical struggle that Paul had that now they're experiencing. I don't know. I wonder what that might have been. Yeah. So that's what I have. That ends the first chapter. Of course, Paul didn't know he was writing it in chapters. We just put it in chapters for us. So that'll finish up our first chapter. When we pick it up again, we'll start in chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, and then we get to my favorite part of this book, and starts in verse 5, which is the Christ town, which is just great. What I'm going to do is just plan on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2:00. I will do this live. So if you want to be on live with it, then come on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2:00, and we can be on together, and you can give some feedback while we're reading. Other than that, thanks for joining in. And while you are out there, continue to be cautious, but also courageous and kind. And until we meet again, all of God's people said, amen.